What is up, ninjas? My name is Samworld, and welcome to the complete guide to master Serum. This is going to be episode 4, and today we're going to be looking at the LFO section inside of Serum. Now, Serum is good at a couple of things, guys. It's good at trap sounds, dubstep sounds, wavetable synthesis, but the other thing that it's super good at is also the LFO that it has. If it wasn't for that LFO, I don't think Serum would have had as much success as it's had. Now, before this synth, I've never seen a synth that had this style of LFO, which is a free-flowing kind of LFO. What I mean by that is that a lot of synths, when you use the LFO in them, you have access to just a sine, a square, triangle, and then that's about it, okay? You don't have access to crazy stuff like this, okay? And of course, you know, the standard saw and saw down. So Serum is the first synth that I've seen where you can actually shape of it to do whatever you want it to do, and that is what makes it very strong. And today we're going to be exploring that, and you're going to be able to learn how to use it and know how to achieve the LFO modulation that you want. Now, LFO, guys, stands for low frequency oscillation, okay? That's pretty much what it is. It's going to be used to pretty much move knobs similar to the envelope, except LFOs aren't usually routed to the amp or the master amp. To pretty much move knobs similar to the envelope, okay? That's pretty much what it is. It's going to be used to pretty much move knobs similar to the envelope, except LFOs aren't usually to the amp or the master amp of a synthesizer. Except LFOs aren't usually routed to the amp or the master amp of a synthesizer. However, let's assume you want a sound where you want it to change a certain way and keep looping. LFOs are there for you. Now, Serum is going to have a few modes that are going to change this, especially one of those, and today we're going to be looking at them. Now, like I stated, guys, Serum is a free-flowing LFO synth, so you can do whatever you want with it, okay? The first thing we're going to be looking at here is going to be the modes, the 3 different modes you can set this LFO up as, okay? The first mode is and this is good for whenever you want a sound to change and you want it to change and always keep changing. What I mean by this, for instance, let's assume that I want to add like a, I don't know, like a pitch change, and this is not something you would do unless this is what you add, like want it to change and always keep changing. What I mean by this, for instance, let's assume that I want to add like a, I don't know, like a pitch change, and this is not something you would do unless this is what you wanted. But with the off mode, if I play a note, I get Then if I play another note, you can see it just, this blue line is where we're at in that LFO, and it just keeps going. So it just keeps going on with its life. But it's always going to start from the beginning now. However, if we go into the next one, which is the trig mode, which makes this still loopable, but it's always going to start from the beginning now. If we go into the next one, which is the trig mode, which makes this still loopable, but it's always going to start from the beginning now. Trig. It always starts from the beginning of that LFO. This is very good for sounds where you want a specific modulation and you don't want it to just be randomly going off. You always want it to sound this way every time you hit. Off is good for, again, adding movement to sounds where it might be a pad, it might be like a lead where you want some cool stuff in it, and vice versa. Now, the next mode is envelope mode, and envelope mode is similar to trig, except for one thing, and that thing is that it might be a pad, it might be like modulation. However, if we go into the next one, which is the trig mode, which makes this still loopable, but it's always going to start from the beginning now. Trig. It always starts from the beginning of that LFO. This is very good for sounds where you want a specific modulation and you don't want it to just be randomly going off. You always want it to sound this way every time you hit. Off is good for, again, adding movement to sounds where it might be a pad, it might be like a lead where you want some cool stuff in it, and vice versa. Now, the next mode is envelope mode, and envelope mode is similar to trig, except for one thing, and that thing is that it won't loop. So if you want the modulation to just happen once, like an envelope, it won't keep doing this. As simple as that. That's the 3 different modes inside of us. As simple as that. That's the 3 different modes. If you want the modulation to just happen once, like an envelope, it won't keep doing this. Simple as that. That's the 3 different modes inside of Serum. Very useful. Again, off is good for, again, adding movement to a sound. You know, this is going to be a modulation that's not going to alter the sound completely crazily, because obviously you still want some tonality and some usability in it. But it's good for that. Envelope mode is good for modulations where you want it to always start at a certain spot and only happen once. And trigs are good for always starting from the same spot at the beginning and looping. So if someone wants to hold it down for a while and you want that modulation to keep going on and looping, trig is going to be the one to go with, okay? I will say trig and envelope are more popular than the off. I don't see many people utilizing off as much. But if you're a sound designer and you're very serious about it, a lot of times the difference between a good sound, a decent sound, and a good sound is the attention to detail when you use an off LFO on a sound that alters the way it moves. And I'll show you guys some presets I have that use that. Okay, with that being said there, guys, we're pretty much going to set this modulation up on the level here. Now, a lot of people will have issues with using envelopes. They don't like them, and that is totally fine. So a lot of people will like to use maybe the LFO to change, warp this sound, the saw. So you can put this into envelope mode. And you can alter the slopes between coordinate points that you can add by double clicking. Hold Alt to make it more exact. And you can also shape it. Even though our amp is saying that we want it just straight out, since we're modulating the level ourselves with an LFO, we still get that good vibe on it, okay? Now, other settings that are very important, and we'll stick to trig right now, are going to be to the right of that. We have BPM mode. That just means beat matched. This is important because if we take it off, you can see that the values totally changed now into seconds rather than beats per minute. So you get 1/4, half a beat, and whatnot. This is useful for people that want to create automations that are smooth. Like so. Let's assume you want to do something like this is important because if we take it off, you can see that the values totally changed now into seconds rather than beats per minute. So you get 1/4, half a beat, and whatnot. This is useful for people that want to create automations that are smooth. Like so. Let's assume you want to do something like that. If we have BPM on, when we do it again, these first few ones are a bit sloppy because they skip huge beats. Like it's just not like it's like so it skips like a good fundamental. So if you want to create something like that where it's smooth and you're increasing the rate over time, turn the BPM off. That's the best advice I can give you. BPM will make it in sync though, so that means it's always in beat. That's the cool thing about it. Okay, so that's BPM mode, and to the right you're gonna have the rate, which is the speed. 4 bars long, you're gonna have 1/2, 1/4. Those are very standard stuff that I think you guys would understand. Now below that we have the anchor, guys, and what I believe that is let's say you're playing a song and you decide to start in the middle of a MIDI note, then this guy will start in the middle here as well. Having that setting on will make it start from there, so that's important. But again, when it comes to a song and you finish the song, it's not really gonna matter as much. So usually I just leave that on and don't worry about it. Now below that you have the trip, which is gonna give you access to beats in between. But again, when it comes to a song and you finish the song, it's not really going to matter as much from there. So that's important. But again, when it comes to a song and you finish the song, to start in the middle of a MIDI note, then this guy will start in the middle here, would understand. Now below that we have the anchor, guys, and what I believe that is let's say you're playing a song and you decide to start in the middle of a MIDI note, then this guy will start in the middle here as well. Having that setting on will make it start from there, so that's important. But again, when it comes to a song and you finish the song, it's not really going to matter as much. So usually I just leave that on and don't worry about it. Now below that you have the trip, which is going to give you access to beats in between, 1/2. Now you have 1/4 T. Fourth, these are just swingy versions of the half and the 1/4 in between them. Perfect 1/4. Think of it as sort of like a triplet, and then if we put dot, we have access to more in between. Okay, these are good for when you want to add swingy kind of vibes to it, but a lot of times, again, I don't find myself using them unless I'm making like a sidetrans bass on triplet mode or whatnot. Okay, so those are going to be the modes here. This is what they're for. Majority of the time, you're really not going to mess with. These guys, you're going to mess more with this here. Now, to the right of that, we have the rise. Now, the rise is super useful as sometimes you want to have that effect where if you're playing a note, let's assume this is going really fast. And let's assume that's as fast as it's going to get, but you want it to slowly go in. The rise is perfect for that. Let's say I put the rise at 1 bar. It's going to easily bring in the LFO. So don't confuse that with the way that the speed of it, you know, it's the volume of the automation. So as you can see here, when we put the LFO, the blue outline is telling us where we're going, at the top being max. Well, this is going to slowly bring it in at the same rate, but it's going to slowly add the modulation in. This is good for, again, sounds where you just want to ease in a modulation, okay? To the right of that, we have the delay. Very simple. It's just going to delay the modulation for however much you want it to. So if you want this to start after 1/8 or 1 bar, I'm hitting the note 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it delays the automation. This is useful for creating sequences, and we will create a couple for this tutorial here so that you guys can know how to use the delay feature. To the right of that, we have the smooth. It smoothens out the LFO, so pretty much if it's very rough and very harsh, it kind of, you can see it kind of finds a little balance in between that, so the LFO is not moving as much, creating that harshness, and it smoothens out. That's all that is for. To the left, we have a folder where you're going to have access to different wave shapes. Let's say we want to saw up. These are just going to be presets here. What I recommend you guys do is if you guys buy sound banks or you buy shapes, or you make a sound and you like a shape, save it. You can save it here, save shape, and then you're going to have access to a folder like this, and you can create a... I recommend you guys not moving, and we after 1/8 or 1 bar, I'm hitting the note 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it delays the automation. This is useful for creating sequences, and we will create a couple for this tutorial here so that you guys can know how to use the delay feature. To the right of that, we have the smooth. it smoothens out the LFO. So pretty much if it's very rough and very harsh, it kind of, you can see it kind of finds a little balance in between that. So the LFO is not moving as much, creating that harshness, and it smoothens out. That's all that is for. To the left, we have a folder where you're going to have access to different wave shapes. Let's say we want to saw up. These are just going to be presets here. What I recommend you guys do is if you guys buy sound banks, or you buy shapes, or you make faux shapes and whatnot, which you can use. You know, I've currently have a couple from different companies, those because I really check the part from there. So that's going to be that. Below that, we have the grid. This is fairly useful for creating complex LFO modulations. Let's say that you want to get it perfectly on beat. When you click, if you have a high grid, you can hold Alt, and like I said, this is going to give you access to more little points here that you can go to. So I'm holding Alt right now. It's sticking to. If I were to do this, and then there you go, then I'm gonna have to do this. Okay, there we go. And this is a bit off, so now I have to move this to the left. So you can see the Alt is really useful, and the higher the grid, the more it allows you to go in between those. Okay. Serum, and now let's make some sounds. First off, yes, last time we tried to make, I think, a bass house sound, or maybe I cut that part out, but now we can do it pretty well because we can kind of use the LFO to give it the shape we need. So let's lower that a couple lock around there. Let's put this LFO shape here like so, and let's give it a bit of a rounded vibe, and we're gonna put that on the wavetail position. Let's put trig on. Again, we always want to start from the beginning because this is altering a bass house sound. What is up, ninjas? My name is Sam World, and welcome to the Complete Guide to Master Serum. Today we're going to be looking at the effects section, which is where you're going to polish the turd sound you have and turn it into something amazing, or that's what I like to say. But usually if you have a good sound and you go into the effects and do some good effects, you can get an amazing sound, guys, and it's all going to be about that. Today we're going to be looking at the first part of the effects, which is from the hyper to the chorus. We're going to be talking about what they do, what they're for, and how to apply it, because at the end of the day, this whole course, I want it to be applicable. I just don't want to be like the hyper is a chorus effect and you can get a stereo sound next. Okay, I want to show you guys what it's useful for and how you will go about it, what each knob does and what role it plays. So with that being said, I think it's fair. We're going to learn some dope stuff. Let's get straight into it. Now, by default, I have a saw. One voice coming out. We all know that if you've been watching the series. Now, the hyper effect is there, and the purpose of it is you can, one, use it to create stereo sounds. Two, you can use it to add more saws into the mix. Let's assume you want to make a hyper saw like the Virus TI synths from the 2000s, which, you know, I don't know how many saws they had in there, like 16 or 32. Some guy said 100 saws on a forum once. I was like, what the fuck? Why would we want so many saws? But let's say that's the effect you want. This is the way we're going to be able to do it, creating that hyper saw. Now, pretty much here, the mix, dry and wet, everyone knows what it does. 50% means half wet, half dry. We fully want it wet, though, if we want to get into that action. Now, pretty much here, guys, we're going to have our unison, which is the amount of duplications. That's the way you need to think about it, because let's say that I have here like 8 saws coming out of this bad boy. Well, we're going to duplicate those 8 saws 4 times, up to 7 times, so you can get a lot of saws. It's going to be a saw orgy up in here. But the point of this effect, guys, is to really just add more detunement if you want it. So let's say I have 1 saw, and we're going to multiply it by 7, so that means we have 7 saws now. Now here we're going to lower these effects, so this is what it sounds like. And you can hear that it's in the center of the mix. And it just sounds a lot dirtier and a lot forward. Okay, now the hyper in Serum states that it's a mini delayed chorus effect. Now, what the fuck does that mean? Well, what that means, guys, is we're going to delay the duplications. We're going to detune them, and then pretty much we're going to modulate them. That's what it does. That's what the hyper is doing. So right now you can hear it's doing nothing. It's just increasing the volume. However, when I start to add detunement into the mix, you can start to hear that the sound starts to get wide, and that's when the chorus and the delay start to play a role. Now, when I start to include the rate, you're going to hear something that resembles a super saw. And that's because we're doing the exact same thing we're doing here. Let's say I have 8 saws and I'm detuning them. We're doing it in the hyper section. Now, the cool thing about the hyper section is the fact that we do have a rate, so we can control the rate at which the saws are detuned. So pretty much going from, let's say, 0 to -1, and how fast the rate decides. So at high rate, you know, it sounds a bit out of tune in a way, but at lower rate. So this is another way, one, that you can create super saws, but another way to just make your super saws huge is 10 times 7. I have 70 super saws here. Essentially, that's what I'm creating with this effect. Okay, now I understand, you know, this is the effect. It's kind of creating an emulation of 70 super saws. It's not the ideal, but that's what the effect is for. Here we're gonna have the retrick, guys, and what the retrick does is it makes sure that the modulation happens at the same spot for all the saws. It's good for lasers. I've never liked the retrick sound when you detune something heavily. That's just me. But it's there if you want to use it, and that's all it does. Similar to what doing the RM phase here to Serum. It's the same idea. All the saws start at the same position. Here, the effect starts at the same position for all the duplicated saws, okay? Now, the next effect we have is a dimension expander, which is another delayed effect to get wideness. Let's put this out. You know, it kind of sounds like a weird kind of reverb in a way at the same time as we're doing that. Now, what a dimension expander is, guys, it's a delayed effect. And for me in the manual, it states like 4 delay effects that are slowly mixed in. So it gets the sound out of phase to get that width to it. That's why when you have it at a very high size, you can hear that it hits on the left side first and then on the right. It's a pretty cool effect. You kind of utilizing like the Haas effect times 4, I want to say. But it's useful for sounds whenever you want that effect. Kind of sounds a little bit like the Sonderling effect if you think about it, okay? Now moving on, we go into distortion. I'm gonna go fast here, guys, because there's a lot of distortion in this, but I feel like it's best for you guys to go through them to know what they are for, but I'll try and give you guys a good definition for each one. The first ones we're gonna have are the weak, the saturation, the very easy light distortion ones. Now the tube, the soft clip, I want is the asim, and you can debate that the zero square are very light distortions. These are going to be useful for adding harmonics to sounds, and that's it. You can push them hard to get them a bit more excitement, but a lot of times, all they're good for is going to be to add a bit of body, more harmonics to the sound, which means you're adding more frequencies there that are pleasant. So the very soft one. Soft clip is the same. The soft clip is going to be more of an analog distortion, which is a good thing for you guys. And the reason I say analog is, as you can see, the drive usually here isn't squared off, but that means it's not like straight square. It kind of has a little bit of a rounded feel to it. So that's how you know it's analog. That's how analog machines would react when you clip them. Next one we have is the Ableton clip, or the FL clip, the digital clip, the hard clip, which you can see is pretty squared off. This one's going to be a bit harder. Has a different reaction, as you can see. This one, the soft clip's a lot warmer. Keep that in mind as we do it. Now, the diodes are harder distortions that are square based. Now, what that means is that if I were to grab a sine wave here and I put a heavy diode distortion on it, it kind of resembles a square that has been low passed. And that's what the diode is for. It's a very heavy distortion. Diode 2, weird distortion for me to explain, but you can kind of see it has that bump and then it kind of goes down. That gives a different vibe for sure. Okay, next we have the line fold, which is a heavy wave shaper where the curve of it is just going in. These are useful for adding, let's say, LFOs to them and doing a bit of like, let's assume we want this here. A bit of modulation. These are really good for that. You can definitely use them by themselves. You can use them without the modulation if you want. To create very sounding FM in a way, aggressive sounds, as well as just very driven leads. These are good for that. The line fold's a heavier version of the sine fold. Just keep that in mind. Okay, as we move along, we have the zero square, which I said was a bit pleasant. It wasn't as hard. But used at very high rates, it can definitely be a crazy distortion. Okay, downsample is the rest effect, so we bit crush the sound. So if we put in a saw, you kind of get the... So that downsample is just reducing the bit rate on it, and you get that at very high interval. You can create Atari style sounds if you want. The asim, as you can see, it's similar to the tube, except when we push it hard, it kind of starts to thin out here and it gets more heavier here. Okay, and then we have a rectify, which is a very heavy mangling style of distortion. So if you just have a saw going through, it kind of just, you can see it kind of does some weird. Now the X shaper, you can put any kind of shape that you want in here and it will create the wave shape here. All the way to the left will create pretty much edit A, as you can see, kind of like in a, I forgot the name, mathematical term for that, but it's kind of here and then flip down here. And then if you have something that it'd be, let's say like this, you can kind of switch to that one. Let's make something different here. I have a couple of presets I've saved that I've made. Nasty Girl. This is useful, let's say again, if you want to add a bit of modulation. It's really useful for that kind of stuff. If you want to add movement to a sound, or maybe you just want to use it like so. Make your own shape, then you can also get some very interesting results out of it. Now the X-Shaper ASIM is a bit different. As you can see, it kind of has a weird vibe, a look to it. But again, it just gives you a different output on that, okay? Now, with each distortion, you're going to have the same controls. You're going to have a pre-filter, which you can go between a high pass, a band pass, and a low pass. This is useful for, let's say, you want to have a sine wave here, or let's do a saw. And a lot of the times, you can do crazy resonations with a band pass. Let's say here we want that. We can create sort of like a very acidy effect. This is going to be the frequency, the cutoff, so using a band pass, and then here's the resonance of it. All right, so that's what it's useful for. You can also use a high pass or a low pass. So essentially, you're filtering the sound before it hits the distortion in case you use like some weird filter here, like a reverb or something like that, okay? Now, the post is going to be useful for sounds. Let's say you create a distortion. Let's say you have a sine wave, per se. And you want to create a very subby, a very closed bass line, but you want to have that heavy low end to it. Well, obviously, if I have this and I put a diode 1, well, I'm getting a lot of highs. Here, what I can do is put post, low pass, and get rid of the highs that were added from the distortion. And that's how we're going to be doing that there. So that's what those are useful for, guys. You can also do a band pass or a high pass. Let's say you don't want the low, or you want to do some cool stuff like that, you can do it here as well, similar to just having a filter. Now, the next effect we have, guys, is going to be a flanger, and this is, I call it the Paris Hilton effect because there was a video of her DJing a while back where all she was doing was using a flanger on every song. But I'm sure you guys know it. If you started DJing, that was probably the first effect that you used to hell every time you would mix or DJ. Now, the flanger is going to be that effect. The rate is the speed of it. Here you can set it to BPM or beats per mode sync, so that means you can have it at 1 bar, 2 bar change. Here we're gonna have the depth. Now think of that as a dry and wet for the feedback in a way. The rate, how much it's gonna affect this feedback. The feedback, honestly, I see it more as a volume for the effect itself, but the higher you have it, the more apparent the effect is, the more ringy the sound it gets. Now, another cool way to use the flanger is literally putting the rate super low where it's doing nothing and just having the high feedback. You can get like a ringy. So definitely you can have that, which gives it a cool kind of vibe if you think about it. If you want to add that metallic sound on top of a sound, that's a good thing to modulate. You can even add it here. You can get some kind of effects on it if that's what you guys want. And finally, the last here is going to be the phase, which just offsets the effect. It does weird stuff to the effect if you have it at 100%, pretty much the whole sound as a whole, because the whole sound, you're getting the full flanger sound going through it. So it's cool for that. Like, gives a bit of stereoness, as you can see as well. Now, the next effect is similar to the flanger, but it's going to be a phaser. And this one's a bit different as it has to do more with like a weird EQ going left and right. If we get rid of, you can already hear the effect. We have the speed, which is the rate. Again, that's going to be an LFO routed to this guy, usually a sine wave. It's a cool effect, kind of alien-y in a way, as you can hear it. Here we're going to have the depth for it. So pretty much what's happening here is we have an LFO on this frequency that's moving left and right, and then the feedback is the strength of the effect. So high feedback you'll hear the effect straight in your face. But pretty much the LFO is moving this guy back and forth. The depth will control how much it's going back and forth. So if I have a very high depth, it's going to go like so. If I have a very low one, it might, and I have it set here, it's probably going to do this. So that's all that is for. Here at very low percent of the depth, this is not really moving much. However, if I put it high, this is just going straight like back and forth. But the phaser is good for adding, again, movement to a sound. Really useful in pads and certain bass lines. You can use it behind a distortion to give it some cool effects, because the way you're EQing it alters the way the distortion will act on it. So again, signal flow is something you can do inside. You can change it, get some dope, interesting sounds in that. So remember, the feedback, I see it as the volume for the effect. If I have no feedback, I have no effect. And finally, the phase is similar to the flanger phase in that it just offsets the effect. Now, the last effect we have, guys, is going to be the chorus effect. Now, chorus itself, it's meant to emulate a choir or a group of strings playing. When you have a group of strings playing, they're each playing one note, but they might be a little bit off by like a bit in terms of timing and in terms of pitch. And that creates a very lush, shimmering effect. And that's what the chorus effect is for. You can use it on specific sounds, on guitars, on basses, and stuff like that. And here we have it inside of Serum. Or a group of strings playing. When you have a group of strings playing, they're each playing one note, but they might be a little bit off by like a bit in terms of timing and in terms of pitch. And that creates a very lush, shimmering effect. And that's what the chorus effect is for. You can use it on specific sounds, on guitars, on basses, and stuff like that. And here we have it inside of Serum. Now, the way the chorus works is we have the rate, which is pretty much the rate of the modulation that will occur. We have delay features here. As the sound is duplicated, we delay it. We're going to delay the timing of it, because when a choir sings, while they might be on time together, if you look at it in terms of milliseconds, not everyone hits the note at the exact same time, which that creates like an effect of a lot of people singing, or a bunch of violins playing, or also it sounds like one unified sound. The next thing we're going to have here is the depth, which is going to be pretty much the amplitude of the effect, how intense it is, and then a feedback here, which we're going to be messing with. If the high feedback will give very metallic vibes, as you're going to see, and then we're also going to have a low pass filter for it. Now at 100%, we're going to check out the chorus effect. Now here we have the rate. Now if I bring up the low pass filter, you can hear that the saw instantly turns stereo, okay? And that's going to be, again, because the chorus is creating that stereo-ness. It's good for that. It's good for those kind of sounds where you have a mono sound or a stereo sound and you just want to add more body to it, more lush to it. Now here, if I increase the rate, it starts to sound again like a super saw, and that's because, again, we have duplicated versions of this saw and each is getting kind of modulated in terms of the pitch. All right, so it's super nice, as you guys can see. Here's the depth. So the higher the depth, you can see the higher the modulation we're doing. And then the feedback it's going to be similar to the effect, kind of like the volume of the effect makes it more pronounced, as if you saw right there, it kind of brought that up. Now we use that feedback high with low depth and no rate. Put a distortion after. You can see by changing the signal flow, I can get really interesting stuff. Now, that's essentially what the chorus is doing, guys, and you're going to use it a lot if you want to kind of turn like a basic pluck saw sound into something luscious and vice versa. So those are going to be the effects we're going through today, guys, and let's use them in some sound design. Let's create some sound. So the first thing we can create is maybe that pluck sound we were talking about. So we're just going to shape it, apply it. Now, basic saw, let's make it sound good. So we do have access to maybe a bit of a distortion. I don't want to kill it completely, so I'm going to put this at 50%, give a bit of drive there to add a bit of saturation. Make it sound fatter, make it sound bigger without destroying the integrity of the original sound. Let's add maybe a chorus now. All right, so what I'm going to do here is maybe increase the low pass filter, because I do want some of those high. A little bit more. Here on the pose, I'm going to use a high pass to get rid of the lows that I don't need. Let's set up the chorus proper there. Maybe the rate, let's have it set to BPM and put it at a bar. Make the pluck a little bit plucky. There we go. It's starting to sound a lot more interesting. If we take these off. And now we put that chord. Let's lower the rate a bit. And then maybe the delay as well and the depth. And then if I add reverb to that, obviously we haven't gone through it, but makes it sound a lot more interesting than rather having, as you guys can see, and it sounds a lot cleaner because we've taken the steps to get the distortion to give us a nice sound, as well as EQing stuff out with the post before it even hits it. The next sound we can make is probably just a very nasty bass line, so we can use sort of like maybe a sine. Okay, we're gonna put a bit of an effect on this, like with a decay to make it punchy as heck. Mono legato that as well. Okay, cool. A bit of white noise. I don't know if we've gone through white noise, but if we haven't, we'll hit it up soon. I'm gonna route the white noise through here. Let's put a bit of a resonance, like so. And let's see what distortion will do if we use like a diode. Oh. Sounds nasty. Let's try a line fold lower. Let's try a sound. Playing around with that filter, as you can see, it does heavily influence the way that distortion is going to act. Let's make a beautiful synthwave lead. Maybe we can kind of just have here like 3 voices that kind of overlap with a higher lead. All right, we're going to put a bit of a filter on it so we don't let out too many high frequencies. A bit of resonance. Okay, cool. Let's add a bit of a hyper there, just to get it to sound a little bit more lush, detune high. All right, cool. I don't think distortion will be needed, but if you want to add a bit of saturation, just have a low drive wet and a bit there. There we go. And let's see if we can add maybe a chorus effect. As we know what it does, it's going to make it sound a little bit more amped as well. So pretty much duplicating the sound a hell of amount of times with chorus and hyper. All right, there we go. Maybe a bit of delay here. Low pass lower, as we want to add it, maybe not too much highs on it. There we go. That's what we're mixing in. High feedback, lower the depth. There we go. Beautiful. Let's see if we can lower this and make this go up maybe around. Oh, you can definitely hear the chorus now. Okay, there you go. Beautiful. We can get rid of the distortion if you don't like the aggressive vibe on it. There we go, baby. So as you guys can see, we can program stuff here. We can make it into a super saw, 8 voices. Just go hella cool.